We love him.
Nah.
Jeremy, it looks like each time I have to speak regarding immigration, I remember the first day you came to visit me in Whittington Hospital. After my operation, flew from Democratic of Congo. The same way Dr. Azad said, they told me there is a local MP want to speak with you. I was expecting you to come with a bodyguard. I was expecting you to be a different human being. But when you came, you sit near my bed. The bed I was lying on, that is where you sit. They offer you a chair, you refuse. You sit at the bed. You look right into my eyes, you said, I'm here to support you. It was like an empty word, but that word gave me strength. That word gave me hope. Jeremy, I remember when I was in Father David Church, I started Light Project Pro International, helping Congolese children. Colleagues, as I said, English is my fourth language. We do have parents who couldn't even help their own children with their homework because of language. Some of them, they never go to school because it's not safe to go to school. As soon as you go to school, rebels are going to bring you. That is where they're recruiting young people on their way to school. We do have parents. They can't help their children. It's not because they are lazy. They didn't have opportunity to go to school. It's not because they don't like to try hard. They don't understand the language. That's the main reason it was for me to set up an organization to step in. And I remember Jeremy came to say, we are together in this journey. Because these children, these young people, they are our future. If we don't help them today, all of us will be in the pain in the future. When they're going to start to kill each other, when they're going to start to do antisocial behavior, all of us will going to feel that pain. I remember again, we are sitting with you, Jeremy. We love you. Can you welcome Mr. Corbyn, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Micheline, and thank you for deeply embarrassing me this evening. I want to say in return, thank you to you for choosing to come to this country, albeit you had to leave Congo under very difficult circumstances, and the incredible contribution you've made to our society and our community. I remember when you founded Light Project International, it was a homework club for Congolese children. We got together, we got support from the church and other people. It's now a very strong, very effective project. And I think over the years, the number of children we've helped to get through school in a way they wouldn't have done otherwise, the way in which some of them have gone to college or university, have got apprenticeships, and are making a fantastic contribution to our society. If you hadn't put in that effort, maybe they wouldn't be as successful as they are. Maybe they wouldn't be able to make the contribution they are. You emboldened and made those young people feel worthy of themselves. And that's what you do in so much of your life. And your country is one that there's a tough competition in this, but all around the world, it is probably the most grossly and grievously exploited country in the world, bar none, by multinational companies, by mining corporations, and by so many more. And some of you will have heard of the book King Leopold's Gold, which was about Leopold and his disgusting behavior in the Congo in the 19th century, and the enslavement of people, and the murder of so many. And I'm just reading a book at the moment called Cobalt, which is about the extraction of cobalt from the Congo, both by very big companies and by child labor at the same time. Every one of us has a mobile phone. Every single one of those mobile phones, in part, the coltan and the cobalt within it comes from the Congo. And so I hope that in this meeting we think of the international ramifications of why people seek asylum and look at the power structures in this world of global corporations with no regard whatsoever for environment, human rights, people, or life in general, exploit those natural resources, leaving behind a residue of pollution, deprivation, degradation, poverty, and short life expectancy. And so it's up to us to consider all these issues when we look at the issues facing migrant people. But Micheline, thank you for so much and all that you do within our society. And of my other friends who have spoken today, my friend Dr. Malik, who told me a wonderful story about how he became a GP. I hope you don't mind me repeating it. He said that in his early days as a GP, he wasn't totally familiar with the English language, but he was very well qualified. And a lady sitting in front of him said, "Doctor, I need to go now." And he said, "Well, I haven't finished the explanation of your condition yet." He said, "Doctor, I need to go now." And he repeated his thing. He said, "Doctor, I really need to go now." So he leans over his desk and says, "Why?" She says, "I need to go and spend a penny." And he said, "It's free on the health service. You don't need to pay me, and I won't accept your money." So he then gives her a lecture about the wonders of the NHS. And she said, "Thanks very much for that. Can I go to the toilet now?" And it's his warmth and empathy for his patients that is absolutely legendary. Ashar, thank you so much for all that you do. You're fantastic. And I cannot remember over the years an anti-racist activity or one that's supporting migrant people or refugees or asylum seekers that David has not been involved with as long as I can remember. He's always there, however big, however small the demonstration, David has always been there. And thank you, David, for all that. And I know it's a hardship for the country for all that you've done. And your contribution, Councillor, was quoting from your wonderful daughter over here. Alicia, please. That was incredible. Stand up, thank you. At 14, to write something as powerful as that is absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much. We're meeting in the aftermath of the horrors of the illegal migration bill that has gone through Parliament. The point you were making, no human being is illegal. It is not illegal to seek asylum. And this piece of legislation that was pushed through Parliament is utterly disgusting in every conceivable way. First of all, it says that anyone arriving in this country without pre-entry arrangements, well, it's quite hard if you're a refugee to get pre-entry arrangements anywhere, will be then removed to Rwanda, and in return the Rwanda government will be paid a great deal of money. Well, they've already been paid a great deal of money. They haven't provided the housing that they promised they would. They haven't provided the facilities they said that they would, and nobody has actually yet been removed to Rwanda. But I question the whole principle behind it. It is simply wrong. It's simply wrong to say that we will offshore the so-called refugee issue that we are facing. And it's all predicated around the alleged huge numbers of people coming from Calais. Well, the numbers that were given earlier in this meeting were that there are 70,000 people waiting in the Home Office list for decision on their asylum application. That is a considerable number, and there's terrible pain for those 70,000. But just put it in perspective, this is a country of 65 million people. 70,000 people equates the attendance at a Premier League football match. And those are the total number that are waiting for an asylum decision. And the total number that have come from Calais is much less than half of that figure. And I just ask you to have a sense of humanity in your considerations about why people come from Calais. I've been over to Calais twice to meet people there. Once when there was a camp, I went with Micheline, and I've been since then, and I'm going again with a delegation from the Council of Europe because I was so disgusted at what I saw there. When we went to the camp, it was appalling. The conditions were poor. It was very cold. It was very wet. The camp was being constantly harassed either by far-right racists in the community or by the police, or a combination of both. And there was brutality in the camp, but there was also a sense of community. And to the credit of the BBC, on one occasion they broadcast songs of praise from the refugee camp, from what was called the jungle camp. The jungle was then closed down, but of course that didn't alter the issue of people trying to get to a place of safety. And I went over there recently with Bel Ribeiro Addy and some others, and Calais had changed a lot. There were huge numbers of police on the streets. There were checkpoints everywhere. There were walls with tubes put on top of them alongside the motorway leading to the port. There was razor wire entanglements around the port and the railway station, and there were huge pieces of stone placed alongside any piece of open road so that nobody could get through it with a vehicle. And the trees had all been cleared from all the areas around Calais so that anyone putting up a tent would be seen straight away. There's an atmosphere of true horror there. And then I talked to the people in the kitchen that prepares food for the people, and they were telling me how they would go around the town in a car, delivering food to places where migrants might be waiting for them, and they would take large plastic barrels of water, particularly in the hot weather, for them to get a drink. The police would contribute to this by going around with bayonets and stabbing holes in the water containers, so they had no cold water to drink at all in the summer. And if they found a car was carrying food for people, they would stop it, inspect the car, check the insurance, check the lights, check the brakes, check the driver's license, etc., etc. That would take maybe half an hour. The car would go then 500 metres down the road, and another police car would stop them and go through the same process. This harassment would go on all day until the food was cold and the refugees had been moved on to somewhere else. And the only place of sanctuary in the town is the Caritas Centre in the centre of Calais, which provides a place for help and for advice, and charging mobile phones and that sort of thing, and a place where they can at least be safe, and some of the people play a bit of football and so on. And I talked to people that were there. And these are the people that are described by our ministers and our media as a marauding army trying to invade this country. The language that's used is horrific. And I looked at these people, mostly young, very stressed, very distressed, in many cases very confused, and in all cases very, very lonely and very, very frightened. And where did they come from? Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Palestine, Yemen, Eritrea, Senegal, Mali, many, many other places. And some of them told me of the journeys they'd made. Some of them didn't even know where they'd been, on a series of journeys across frontiers, around barbed wire, with police harassment, with arrest. And they got to Calais, and some of them had family connections in Britain and were trying to get across to Britain in these flimsy dinghies. Now, I have no time for people's traffickers. I've got no time for those that exploit this situation. None of us in this room have. But we've created a market for them by the lack of any safe routes for people to seek asylum. So they risk everything to cross the channel. None of us in this room would willingly get into one of those dinghies to go across the channel unless you were utterly desperate. If they get offshore and start going out, if the French Coast Guards catch them, they bring them back, make sure they're totally wet, take all their possessions away from them, puncture the dinghy they're in, and make them walk onwards to somewhere else, like they're chased out of the town. This, I'm sorry to say, is 21st century Europe on its treatment of utterly desperate people. And so when I go to the Council of Europe, as I do, to raise issues about the European Court of Human Rights and the European Convention of Human Rights and the election of judges to the European Court of Human Rights, I find that the far right, and there are a number of far-right MPs, the Council of Europe is nothing to do with the European Union, it's a parliamentary assembly of all countries in Europe. And there's some extremely unpleasant, very right-wing members from Hungary, from Italy, and one or two other countries who just use the language of hate towards them. In fact, I raised the question of why they were allowed to use hate language in the chamber during the last session, when a Hungarian mayor was describing the alleged attacks on people in his town by asylum seekers. He had no evidence to back any of this up, by the way. And in my mind, I was reading the newspapers of Kent, which announced there was a diphtheria outbreak in Kent because of asylum seekers. No evidence was offered whatsoever, just an assertion. And that's the atmosphere we're living in. The British government then puts through its bill, which, the first time I've ever seen in Parliament, on the frontispiece of the bill, there's supposed to be a statement by the Secretary of State introducing any government bill which says this is compliant with the 1998 Human Rights Act. Priti Patel writes, I cannot say that because this bill is not compliant. And Parliament still voted it through. So what's the point of having the declaration if it clearly means nothing? And I think everybody knows that this is part of an agenda to ultimately try and withdraw from the European Convention on Human Rights and from the European Court of Human Rights. An establishment actually set up mainly by British judges in the 1940s, which is actually part of our law, our right to take a case to the European Court of Human Rights. And what's the anger of the Tories? Because it's made one ruling against Britain over the deportation of a Syrian asylum seeker, Iraqi asylum seeker, to Rwanda, and a temporary judgment. And so, in the campaign against this bill, and the campaign for justice for people seeking asylum and safety in this country, bear in mind the agenda behind it is to destroy any vestiges of international humanitarian law, which are so important for the rights of all of us. So if we are going to break the European Convention on Human Rights and say two fingers to the European Court of Human Rights, we're in no position to complain about human rights in Turkey or Hungary or anywhere else in the world, because we ourselves have said we'll have no part in these things. It's actually very important for our rights as well as the rights of the individual people who are seeking a place of safety within our society. But you know, when asylum seekers arrive within our society, they're faced with poverty, they're faced with hostility, they're faced often with hunger and forced to beg on the streets of our country. And those that are denied any recourse to public funds rely on the charity of churches, of synagogues, of mosques, and of local authorities. And I have to say, well done Islington Council for doing all it can with its group for dealing with people who have no recourse to public funds and the support it manages to give to them in various ways. So well done our council on being imaginative about this, but as a society we've got to ask ourselves some questions. I absolutely welcome all the Ukrainian refugees that have come to this country. I'm delighted that they've found a place of sanctuary and safety here and the fantastic contribution they are making to our society. I meet them in the schools, I meet them in other places. Fantastic, and I fully support them against the horrors of the war that they're going through, and the war has got to end. But I ask myself this question: if it's good enough and right as it is to give support to Ukrainian refugees, why not for Yemen, Palestine, Syria, Iraq and everywhere else at the same time? And we have to, I think, make that message extremely clear. And so our meeting tonight is about standing up for the rights of people to seek a place of safety and seek asylum within our society. But it's also, I think, celebrate the achievements of people that have come and made such a contribution to our society. And I was doing an election rally in Yorkshire a few years ago. And I was asked if I wouldn't mind, it was in a football stadium, a rugby football stadium. They said, would you mind coming over to the office? There's two men who really want to talk to you, and it's very important, and you've got to come very urgently. And I thought, oh my God, the police are here, or whatever. So I said, okay, all right, calm down, I'll come. So I went over to the office, and there was two very smart young men. They stood up as soon as I walked in like this, came forward and shook hands with me and said, you remember us, don't you? I looked at them and I said, I'm really sorry. I usually do remember people. I said, I'm really, really sorry. I don't. Where did we meet? They said, you came into our tent in Calais. What are they doing now? Studying, working, contributing to our society. Shouldn't we be proud of them for what they've achieved and what they're trying to do to our community and our society? And also, if you just look at the economic arguments, well, there are 100,000 vacancies in the NHS. There's a labour shortage in every single industry, yet we have many thousands of people seeking asylum who are not allowed to work. Well, it strikes me as not very sensible not to link up the two issues and say we've got an enormous resource here, if you want to use the economic language, in which we should be welcoming these people and giving them the opportunity to contribute to our society. Every single one of us that's ever used the National Health Service has enjoyed the skills of yourself and many, many others who've made their homes in this country and made that contribution. Our health, our living standards, and our community relies on their skill and their work. And so let's dedicate ourselves to opposing the rise of racism in our society and all across Europe. Because I can't be the only person that's frightened of the attitude that's been taken towards asylum seekers across Europe. Instead of there being a European response of saying, we will ensure there is a place of safety, what do? Put up the drawbridge, put up the fences, put up the surveillance, and engage in pushbacks. Pushbacks which are illegal at sea, between Greece and Turkey, between Italy and Libya, and so on, and of course the things that is going on in the Channel. Is the history of the 21st century going to be that in the first 30 years of this century, X thousand people died in the Mediterranean, X thousand died in the Aegean? How many hundreds have died trying to get across the English Channel? And at the same time, the politicians all across Europe were using the most disgusting rhetoric, reminiscent of the worst periods of European history, against minorities and migrants, as though they're a marauding, invading force. What has happened to our humanity? What has happened to our humanity to, instead of condemning people, welcoming them as fellow human beings, trying to make their contribution to this world? There are 70 million refugees around the world, most created by wars, and there's obviously the war going on between Ukraine and Russia, but there's many, many other conflicts around the world. Those conflicts, fueled by the arms trade, fueled by the mining companies, fueled by global corporations, and those all create victims. And I've been given 1 minute to go, so I will stop at this point and just say thank you to everyone in this room for all that you've done to oppose racism within our society, and all you've done to try and create a better society. We have it within ourselves, and we have the resources to provide the housing that's necessary, the health care that's necessary, the education that's necessary, and the decent living standards that are necessary for everybody within our society. But we cannot do it if at the same time we encourage and condone the enormous growth of lavish and excessive personal wealth of the very wealthiest in our society. To paraphrase Bernie Sanders, when he said, America can afford anything except inequality, the same applies here. Let's dedicate to ourselves to a world free from racism, in favour of justice and peace, and above all, a decent opportunity for every young person in our society to make the most of their lives and achieve the best, and not walk by on the other side. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. No, I went to collect a paper where